This is my brand Miko. Miko is a heavily print and knitwear based menswear brand that takes inspiration from Grandpa O's post-war waste not want not mentality. The name Miko comes from my grandpa's name Mike Oakey. I decided to join the I and the K together to give an impression of circuit boards as my grandpa's lifelong career was as an electrician. In the summer, I decided to experiment with cyanotypes as my grandpa told me that he remembers using blueprints when he first started working. Cyan blue and tones of blue are apparent throughout my branding collection. I initially looked at Junior Watanabe as a competitor as I was interested in the way that he cuts and creates garments as well as the fabric choices that he uses. I was also heavily influenced by Dries van Noten's unique and vibrant prints. My customer is called James. He's a millennial who lives in the suburbs of London and likes to explore the outdoors alongside being a keen photographer and artist. James values spending time with family and friends and is very family orientated. This is my design book where I began experimenting with different ways of printing. Initially started printing with logs and ink from my grandpa's house. I then began experimenting with anthotypes and cyanotypes to see what the outcomes would be. I was inspired to experiment with cyanotypes as my grandpa told me that he used to use blueprints when he first started working. These cyanotypes took an hour in direct sunlight to expose. They're slightly blurry due to wind exposure. My colour inspiration is from pictures that my grandpa took of the last machine that he installed before retiring in 2004. I began moulaging with a range of knitted jumpers to explore different silhouettes and shapes. I screen printed 2 old shirts to start to visualise large-scale prints on a garment. I found this really helpful to then move forward with the development. I then started to develop shirt ideas, so I looked back at old newspaper clippings from the 1920s. I was really interested in creating a shirt that looks like 2. This is where I've documented the 3D stages of both my shirt and cardigan toiles. I tried my oversized shirt on a variety of people since I made it to be 3XL. It was interesting to see how it draped on different sizes. I then began pinning my chosen prints and chosen knit piece to my toiles. I'm happy with how they look and I really like how vibrant the colours are together. These are my developments for my print placement on my shirt. I wanted the print scales to vary on the different shirt layers. This is my initial lineup so far. I'm quite happy with the balance of knit pieces and printed garments that I have at the minute. For my print book, I initially looked at extracts from my grandpa's old workbooks from the 1970s, as well as taking inspiration from his workshop shelves. I started off printing in very vibrant and bright colours, but quickly toned them down to match my colour inspiration, which is of old pictures of the last machine my grandpa installed before retiring. I then took inspiration from his toolboxes consisting of screws, nuts and bolts. Going back to my initial inspiration of cyanotypes, I decided to use the exposure unit in the print room to see whether there was a difference in tone. I then began to explore half-tone printing. I really like this style of printing as I feel that it gives my prints more depth. I then decided to layer my half-tone prints with solid line prints. After a few attempts with scale and image choices, I'm really happy with how they've turned out. I decided to draw abstract versions of circuit boards to layer on top of my half-tone prints. I then experimented with the scale of the abstract print to see what effect it created. These are my chosen prints for my lineup. I wanted to use the first two on my main garment. Initially I started knitting simple stripes to see what colours work best together. I then began to experiment with a loose version of the cardigan knit. The tuck stitch is my favourite knit sample as I feel like it'll work really well with my printed shirt. These are a few of my large knit samples that I used for moulage, as well as a cuff sample to see what it would look like on my toile. I really like the last two knit samples and I'm basing my knitted cardigan colours on the final sample.